We all know NBA players make a lot of money. And when a team gives them a contract, they want to get their money's worth. So when a player doesn't meet expectations, it's trouble for everyone. For players like Stephen Curry, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Damian Lillard, their big salaries are understandable because they play so well. But for others, they simply don't live up to what was expected from their contract. So let's take a look at the current top 10 worst NBA contracts. Starting off with the infamous Ben Simmons, whom, as of now, holds the worst deal in the NBA. This guy has been an All-Star and an All-Defensive Team member 3 times, but it looks like those days are long gone. In 2019, the Philadelphia 76ers gave the previous number 1 overall pick a 5-year, $177 million contract extension, but that turned out to be an absolute disaster. In February 2022, in the middle of a year-long holdout, the Sixers gave him to the Nets. He finally got back on the court this season, but the Nets weren't in his favor this time. In fact, they were the lowest of his career. Plus, his ongoing back problems seem to really be getting in his way. Simmons still has 2 years and $78 million on his contract, and the Nets will have a super hard time getting rid of him because, honestly, why would anyone even go near this deal? Up next, there's Rudy Gobert. In December 2020, the Jazz made a huge move by giving him a 5-year contract worth $205 million. And at that time, it ranked as the 3rd largest deal in the league's history. After winning the Defensive Player of the Year award for 2 consecutive years and earning his first All-Star selection in 2020, there were still concerns about Gobert's contract. People were still sort of skeptical, considering he was a big player who didn't contribute much on offense. And in the end, they did turn out to be right. The player's defensive skills, which led the Jazz to trade him to the Timberwolves after the 2021-2022 season. Unfortunately, his pay in Minnesota took a hit and his stats dropped across the board, and the team is stuck paying him over $131 million for the next 3 years. Moving on to Gordon Hayward, who started a deal worth $120 million over 4 years with the Hornets. Back in 2020, no one thought this was a good idea. Because of injuries, he never lived up to the big deal the Celtics gave him 3 years ago. Plus, it seemed like a crazy overpay. Clearly, it didn't take very long for the tables to turn. Even though he's done well in Charlotte, his numbers have been going down for years. Now the 33-year-old is set to make $31.5 million in the last year of his contract, and the Hornets don't seem too happy about it. Next, let's not forget to talk about Michael Porter Jr. It's easy to see why people like him. He's super tall and a fairly good scorer. Sadly, his biggest flaw, which is even more obvious now, is that he can't stay fit. Back problems kept him from playing for most of his one-and-done college season, what should have been his starting season, and almost the whole of the 2021-22 season. In fact, just last month, his heel injury caused him to miss another bunch of games. In September 2021, he signed a 5-year rookie contract worth $172 million, which could go up if he makes an All-NBA team. Now, since he's finding his way back up the ladder, do you think he could live up to everyone's expectations? Speaking of expectations, let's talk about Deandre Ayton, who's made a deal with the Suns that pays him over $100 million over the next 3 years. The Celtics don't seem to like this number, so it looks like Boston will have to look elsewhere to fill their front court needs. The 6'11" center would have been a good addition for Boston, but not at that price. The Suns have to trade him for a lot of players, like 2 or 3 good bench players, and if they're lucky, 1 or 2 first-round picks. You may be thinking, that doesn't seem like much for a former number 1 overall pick, but Ayton and the Suns have had a tense relationship for years, and the team's last 2 playoff runs didn't go well because of it. So other than him, we've also got John Collins, a player who the Hawks picked and trained, which is why after his deal was up, it was hard for them to let him go. Even though the forward didn't really fit into the team's long-term plans, in the summer of 2021, they gave him a 5-year, $125 million deal. Since then, Collins' play has gone down quickly. He scored 21.6 points and 10.1 rebounds per game during the 2019-2020 season. Last year, it went down to an average of 13.1 points and 6.5 rebounds per game. Thankfully, Atlanta has found a team that wants him. So now that the Jazz have signed the 25-year-old, they have to pay him $78 million over the next 3 years. Yikes! Let's hope they can revive his career. Meanwhile, Miami Heat signed Kyle Lowry to a 3-year, $85 million deal in 2021. The player, who was a 6-time All-Star for the Raptors, just hasn't been the same anymore. In the last year in Toronto, he scored 17.2 points, 5.4 rebounds, and 7.2 assists, which made him a good point guard. But during the 2022-23 season in Miami, let's just say he could have done a lot better. In fact, it's gotten so bad that the Heat have actually thought about just letting his deal go and spreading it out over more than one season so it doesn't look as bad. The 37-year-old now owes $29.7 million for the 2023-2024 season, which is going to be the last year of his deal. In the same way, the Pelicans aren't too happy with Zion Williamson, mostly because the player's been having a pretty hard time in both his job and his personal life. His 5-year, $194.3 million deal starts next season, but he won't get any of that money until he plays the minutes the Pelicans want him to. What's interesting is that Williamson has been in the league for 3 years with some pretty good scores. Even so, fans could really see him starting a new era in the NBA, but if his injuries keep getting in the way, don't you think the Pelicans would be better off trading him? Guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens. But for now, let's turn our attention to Julius Randle. Remember when the fans of the Knicks were absolutely crushed after losing to the Heat in the Eastern Conference semifinals? Well, what really stood out like a sore thumb was how he played. Instead of Jalen Brunson, Randle was meant to be their main offensive option. This year in the playoffs, he averaged only 16 points per game, but what really did him in was his choke job in Game 6, which had to be won. He only got 15 points and only made 21% of his shots. After the game, a lot of people were seen stepping on his signs outside the arena, and in fact, some of them even asked to trade him. The player had previously signed a 3-year, $63 million deal with the Knicks, but in August 2021, he signed a new extension. With this, he has a player option for the 2025-2026 season, but if things get really bad, the Knicks can still sell him. So last, but definitely not least, let's talk about Dillon Brooks. After LeBron James and the LA Lakers stopped him from talking trash, it didn't seem like there was much interest in the former Grizzlies player. So much so that even his old team said they would not bring him back under any circumstance. Yet, the Houston Rockets still gave Brooks a huge 4-year, $80 million contract. He was on the second team of All-Defensive in 2022-2023, but LeBron beat him in the playoffs. Brooks was also a bad thing for the Grizzlies' offense, so when the next season starts, the Houston Rockets will have a lot to do. I guess only time will tell how their decisions will turn out now that they are free agents. Well, that's all for today, guys. Which of these did you think was the absolute worst? Let us know in the comments below, and make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell for more. Happy watching!